Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back. Welcome to Guide London. We've restarted our broadcasts all about the stories of London. We're bringing you places to go, things to do, and a bit of background, bit of context, and all the rest. My name's Fiona. I am one of the Blue Badge tourist guides in London, one of about 600 members of the Association of Professional Tourist Guides, and we are the organisation behind the Guide London website and these broadcasts. And welcome back. I know many of you will have seen some of the ones we did in the spring. In the spring and summer, we did about 40 different broadcasts covering a whole host of different topics. If you're discovering us new this time round, then do go back and have a little look at those. They're all available on YouTube still, so you can browse through and pick whichever topic tickles your fancy most. And actually, we started last week. So our plan for the moment is to do one broadcast a week on a Tuesday afternoon, so 4 o'clock on Tuesdays. And then, of course, you can always catch up later if the time doesn't suit you. And we started last week with a fantastic talk all about the unknown soldier in Westminster Abbey, and of course, marking the 100-year anniversary of the funeral of the unknown soldier. But if you didn't see that live, I would suggest do go back and catch up on it, because it was just a really interesting talk, and so interesting to compare how, you know, every year nowadays we pause and we remember people who've served for this country and died in that service. And so fascinating to see how the way we do it now relates to what it meant to people back in the immediate aftermath of the Second World War, and just how important it was back then. But today we are going to take you to a green and pleasant land, a little slice of Eden in the middle of London. And I think it's certainly true that a lot of us during this last year have really appreciated nature, and whether it's kind of gardening or growing herbs on a window box or going out for walks in the countryside or in the kind of the trees, it's something that I think a lot of people have found a lot of solace in amongst the plants and the wildlife. And we are really fortunate in London that we are an incredibly green city with a lot of big open spaces. In fact, we're technically a forest. We have enough trees, enough density of trees, that we officially count as a forest. But if you want to see the exotic plants, then there is one place better than any other to go and explore, and it is the Botanic Gardens in Kew. So to tell us all about it, I would like to welcome my friend and colleague Patricia, who is going to be telling us about Kew today. Hello, Patricia.
Hello. So yes, I'm Patricia, a London Blue Badge tourist guide offering tours in many of London's historic sites, museums and galleries, but I particularly like gardens. And in addition to offering tours in English, I'm also qualified to guide in Dutch, French, Spanish and Japanese. So today I'm going to talk about, it's just 20 minutes taster talk about the Royal Botanic Gardens of Kew. But my virtual tours are usually about an hour long, and with 15-20 minutes afterwards for question and answers. So yes, I love guiding at Kew Gardens. And the reason is that it's a 300 acres garden with the largest living plant collection in the world. It's a place of 150 sorry about that. Sorry. So it's a place of 100. It's 300 acres garden with the largest living plant collection in the world. It's a place with 250 years of history and a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 2003. It's not only a place of beauty, but it's a place of science and conservation at the forefront of saving our planet. And that is because of the Millennium Seed Bank project, a groundbreaking project started in 2000 with the aim to eventually stock seeds from all the plants of the world. And by the end of this year, so after 20 years after the start, they will have reached their 25% of their targets. Kew Gardens also started 2 years ago a DNA and tissue bank. And of the 1,100 staff members who work at Kew, Everybody thinks if you work for Kew Gardens, you must be a gardener. But at least 350 people who work for Kew are scientists, and some are at the moment researching the impact of climate change. So let's have first a look at a map of the early 18th century. Here we go. So here you can see a map of the 18th century, and at the beginning of the 18th century, Kew Gardens was not more than a 9 acres garden, just this part of it. It is not until 1772 that King George III inherited the nearby royal estate of Richmond, and he joined the two parks into one garden. Hence, Kew Gardens is named plural Kew Gardens and not just Kew Garden. So we know that the Stuarts and during the Stuart and the Tudor times and the Stuart times, kings came to Kew for hunting. They arrived by barge via the River Thames from central London, or sometimes they used to stop over at Kew on the way to Hampton Court Palace. Now the Georgian kings were very keen and enthusiastic gardeners, especially King George II and George III, who actually spent a lot of time at Kew with their families to escape from this often stressful duties from the royal duties, or to sometimes escape from polluted London, because there was a lot of smog in the 18th century in London. People used to heat their homes by burning coal. But considered the real founder of Kew Gardens is in fact Princess Augusta, also Princess of Wales. She married Prince Frederick of Wales. He was the son of King George II, and together they shared a dream. They wanted to create an exotic garden with all plants arriving from different parts of the world, from the British colonies. Sadly for Prince Frederick, his dream was short-lived as he died prematurely. Some say he died from a chill while gardening at Kew Gardens. Others say he was hit on the head by a cricket ball while playing a cricket match at Kew Gardens. So in fact, it was Augusta who then continued her dream project by herself, or in fact, not completely by herself, with the help of the Earl of Bute. And it was the Earl of Bute who introduced her to a famous gardener, landscape designer, architect, William Chambers. And it was William Chambers who then went on to create a beautiful orangery where Princess Augusta could keep her favorite citrus plants, but also a very exotic Chinese pagoda. Here you see the Great Pagoda of Kew. Now, William Chambers was the son of a British diplomat, and he'd spent quite some time in China, during his childhood, and he was influenced by the porcelain pagoda of Nanjing in China, which is still a tourist attraction today in China. And that inspired him to build this fantasy building, which must have dazzled people in the 18th century, not only for its size, because people were only accustomed to seeing that the only tall buildings in London were the spires of churches, but also because it was decorated with 80 gilded dragons, which appeared to be jumping off the edges of the octagonal building. It must have been a really exotic building to people at the time. Another interesting, quirky story about the Great Pagoda is that during the Second World War, this pagoda with its 10 stories was used to test the aerodynamics of bombs. Holes were drilled in each of the floors, and engineers used to drop bombs without letting them explode, through to see how fast they would drop. So this was kept a secret until after the Second World War. Now, we come now to King George III, who was also nicknamed Farmer George because of his interest in farming and nature. And it was in fact King George III who continued to enrich the Royal Botanic Gardens of Kew with the aid of Joseph Banks. Now, Joseph Banks was an English naturalist and botanist who went on an expedition with James Cook, and they bumped into the east coast of Australia, where they founded Botany Bay, from where he brought back many exotic species of plants, which he gave to Kew Gardens. Now, George III was also fascinated with the pursuit of accurate timekeeping for the purpose of the growing navigation of the oceans. And apparently had asked William Chambers to build a royal observatory at Kew Gardens. So the world nearly ended up with a Kew Mean Time instead of a Greenwich Mean Time, if that would have happened, if that would have materialized. So sadly, by the end of his life, George III became very mentally ill. You may have seen the film which was made in 1995, The Madness of King George, which highlights his difficulties with mental disease. And so when he became ill, the Kew Gardens was actually abandoned, as the royal family didn't visit often anymore. The gardens went into decline until the 19th century, when Queen Victoria actually saved the gardens when she ascended to the throne in 1837 by giving the gardens to the public. And now throughout its 250 years of history, Kew Gardens has had several ups and downs. And one of the downs was that you see here the Kew Gardens used to have a beautiful Victorian tea house, which was actually burned down by two suffragettes on the 20th of February 1913. Two suffragettes, Lillian Lenton and Olive Worry, burned down the tea house at Kew as one of a number of arson attacks they had planned on central London. This was, of course, to obtain the vote for women. They were subsequently sentenced to 18 months at Holloway Prison, but they were released within a month after they went on hunger strike. Another disaster, actually worse disaster for Kew Gardens, was the big storm of 1987. On the 16th of October, hurricane force winds of 110 miles per hour swept through England and flattened 700 of Kew Gardens trees. It took the gardeners 2 years to clear the mess. So one of my favorite places to guide is in the Palm House of Kew. It's a true Victorian engineering masterpiece. Now, the Victorians were great greenhouse builders because of the handmade glass. So this has 16,000 of individually, hand-blown glass panes. And this magnificent building was designed by the architect Decimus Burton, who worked closely together with a man who was a shipbuilder called Richard Turner. Hence the round shape of the building. It looks almost like a hull of a ship upside down. So there are many things to see at the Palm House. First of all, when you go inside, it's very warm and humid. If you wear glasses, when I go there with clients and wearing glasses, your glasses will steam up instantly. And of course, lots of animals are attracted to the tropical warmth. So the Palm House has its own residents. It's got a few red robins and wrens who you can hear happily chirping. And it also got an exotic Chinese dragon called Techno, who is often hiding somewhere near the papaya tree. Now, to emulate the tropical rainforest atmosphere in the 19th century was not evident, but the Victorians were great engineers. So they actually installed ovens underneath the building where they could burn coal. And so the glasshouse is actually connected by an underground tunnel with a railway track where carts of coal were actually pulled and pushed up and down the track to a nearby smokestack, which is cleverly disguised as an Italianate bell tower. So there are many things to see in the Palm House, from different species of exotic palm trees to spices such as tamarind, henna, vanilla, coffee, medicinal plants, including the Madagascar periwinkle, which is used for the treatment of cancer, leukemia particularly, but nowadays also for Hodgkin's disease, diabetes, and believe it or not, but a few decades ago, the Madagascar periwinkle was nearly extinct. But the star tree of the Palm House is definitely the Encephalatos altensteinii, the difficult binomial name, simpler called the Jurassic palm. It's the oldest, it's the oldest pot plant in the world. This plant once served as food for the dinosaurs. It survived several climate changes and even the dinosaurs. And this particular one on display at the Palm House arrived at Kew in 1775. It came on one of the voyages of Captain Cook from the eastern Cape of South Africa. It survived the long journey as it was strapped to the deck so that it had access to rainwater and sunlight. And today it is 4 meters tall and weighs nearly 1 ton. So another cycad of interest is on display in another greenhouse, in the Temperate House, and is called the wood cycad from the Natal region of South Africa. Now, the Temperate House is twice the size of the Palm House and was also designed by Decimus Burton in the 19th century. And this plant here is the wood cycad, named after the man called Wood, who actually discovered this tree in the forests in Natal. And this plant is nicknamed the loneliest bachelor in the world because, believe it or not, this is the only one left. It's a male tree. They come in male and female trees, and they each have these cones, these beautiful cones. And of course, you need both trees next to each other so that they can pollinate each other. But sadly, what has happened is that because of the architectural beauty of the cones, there has been in the last decades an illegal market where people could sell them for quite high prices to collectors. And all the trees have been stripped of their cones, with the result that the one at Kew Gardens is the only one left. And there is now a team of Kew Gardens looking in South Africa to find a female tree. But so far, this one at Kew Gardens is still the loneliest bachelor in the world. Now, another interesting place to visit, especially and perfect for a rainy day, is the Marianne North Gallery. Now, Marianne North was a formidable Victorian lady, pioneer in botanical art and an intrepid explorer. She actually traveled to 15 different countries in 14 years on 4 different continents, and she left 833 oil paintings to Kew, which are exhibited in the gallery. And in fact, Marianne North had a very close relationship with her father, who was a British MP. And when her mother died, when she was still a young child, she swore never to get married, but to look after her father. And she did so until he died. He died when she was in her 40s, and she inherited a fortune from her father. And she decided to travel and paint, which was not, of course, a matter of fact. It was very unusual for a Victorian lady to do that. She needed, of course, the introductory letters from her father, who was an MP, to allow her to travel the world. And in England, she met Charles Darwin, and it was Charles Darwin who actually convinced her to go and see the koalas in Australia. So she went to Australia and also to New Zealand. Now, she really didn't care about Victorian high-class society. In fact, the croquet and badminton playing ladies aggravated her. She preferred a simple life, traveling on a mule deep into the forest to paint. Now, she spent the last years of her life writing her memoirs, the memoirs of her journeys from a cottage in rural England. But then my personal favorite of Kew Gardens is actually the Water Lily House. There's so many places to talk about. The Water Lily House I have to cover. A Water Lily House was built. It's another glass house built to showcase the giant Amazon water lily, or the Victoria Amazonica, named after Queen Victoria. It was considered one of the wonders of the Victorian age. Now, the leaves can grow up to 2.5 meters wide, and the leaves are so strong that they can carry the weight of a child up to 12 kilos. Now, this exotic water lily was first discovered by a British botanist in Bolivia in 1801. But it wasn't until the mid-19th century that a jar of 25 seeds was dispatched to England. And it arrived in England, and the seeds were divided amongst botanists and curiosity collectors. And this, of course, instigated a race in England to grow the first giant water lily. Now, Kew Gardens failed to do that, but it was Joseph Paxton, who actually worked at the time as a gardener for the Duke of Devonshire at his Chatsworth House estate. It was Joseph Paxton, by applying the right amount of light, heat and water, he was able to actually grow the first giant water lily, which was then given to Kew Gardens and exhibited in the water lily house. So, well, did you know that Kew Gardens also has a palace, a royal palace? Kew Palace is the smallest royal palace in Britain. It's used now occasionally by the royal family, but originally it was built in 1631 by a wealthy Flemish silk merchant, and it was King George III who bought it for his family, because King George III and his wife Queen Charlotte, they had 15 children, and they used to spend time and live here in the Kew Palace. And it's there in the Kew Palace that actually Queen Elizabeth celebrated her 80th birthday in 2006 with a private dinner followed by spectacular fireworks. Now, Kew Gardens also has its own police force. Originally, since 150 years, so in the 19th century, the police force consisted of part-time gardeners or veterans of the Crimean War. But today, Kew Gardens still has 20 staff members of their police force, and they own one vehicle, which makes it the smallest police force in the world. And last but not least is the fact that Kew Gardens just only charged 1 penny as an entrance fee until 1983. They started charging only during the First World War and only charged a penny until 1983. Now, today, an entrance fee for an adult would cost £20, which may seem a lot, but it's all worth it because, of course, the money is important for all the scientific projects and for the preservation of nature. So, in fact, there are many, many more interesting facts and stories on Kew Gardens, which you can hear in one of my virtual or real life tours. I can adapt my tours to suit children with fascinating stories on history and on plants. But if you have questions, this is the moment. In fact, if you want to book, these are the details. You can book either directly with me via my website or via the website of Guide London.
Thank you so much, Patricia. That was fabulous. And it really does it's whetted my appetite to go and visit Kew. I haven't been in the last couple of years. And especially this time of year, it must be really beautiful with the autumnal colours in the trees. It
is. I actually find that at Kew Gardens, there is something of great interest in every month of the year.
Yeah. And I was wondering, they sometimes have stuff for Christmas, don't they? Are they planning lights and things for Christmas this year?
They do, yes. Despite even the situation we're in today with COVID, they're still this year, they're doing their Christmas show, which is hugely popular. It's a light show, which brings the gardens, into a real Christmas atmosphere.
Yeah. And is it worth, I was just thinking, presumably it's the gardens are open at the moment. Are the indoor spaces open?
Yes, sadly, because of the second lockdown now, they had to close some of the indoor spaces. So, but the gardens are still accessible to the public. You can still go and you can enjoy the outdoors now.
Yeah, perfect. And hopefully we've had lots of...
once this situation is over, hopefully soon they will reopen the galleries and the indoor spaces as well.
Yes. Absolutely. We've had lots of comments, lots of people saying where you are in the world, which is always lovely to know where you're viewing from. And today already we've had people from Brazil and Indonesia and more. I started writing a list and then I ran out of too many comments. And lovely sunsets over the Wirral and Formby as well, which is good to know. But if you've got any questions for Patricia, you can still pop them in the chat if you're watching this live. And I was going to ask, actually, in your slide of the temperate house, I think there was a lovely blue kind of sculptural thing there. Now that was a Chihuly sculpture.
Indeed, yes, it is a Chihuly. Yes, Chihuly, the great American sculptor, did an exhibition at Kew in the summer. I took that picture myself, literally 2 years ago in the summer. And that was when the Temperate House, which had been under restoration for 5 years, was just reopened. And so they had this beautiful glass sculpture hanging from the ceiling. So it's not there anymore today, but Kew Gardens does that regularly. They do temporary exhibitions alongside, where you can stroll through the gardens and see some amazing sculptures or amazing art as well.
Yeah. I didn't see the recent one, but I did see, I think Chihuly did one there previously, and I saw a bit of that. And because his sculptures are so organic, it just seemed like the perfect setting in amongst the sort of exotic.
Absolutely. And they will be set, they have a lake there. On the lake, at the most, it's like a treasure hunt through the gardens where you can see beautiful sculpture. Yes, that's what it was like. It was one of my favorite temporary exhibitions at Kew Gardens.
Lovely. And I was just thinking as well, the other place in London you can see a Chihuly, I think it's permanently there now, is in the entrance of the Victoria and Albert Museum.
Yes, they have this spectacular, impressive chandelier in the entrance hall at the Victoria and Albert Museum.
And I'm assuming that Kew have a shop these days. Do you know, is it online?
They have a shop, and now, of course, yes, during the Christmas period, so you can buy lovely gifts there to support them, because, of course, Kew Gardens has suffered a lot because of the pandemic. And so they do very nice gifts, and that you can buy that online.
And I was thinking that in the run up to Christmas, this year, if you're looking for interesting gifts and also something that will support the big museums and galleries, they all have online shops these days. So it's a really, really good possibility to help out, as well as get some quite interesting, distinctive gifts for people. So I was going to say, Patricia, we've got her website and things, but we've also got, if you want to contact her, then the other way that you can do it is, of course, by heading over to the Guide London website. And the easiest way, if you want to contact a particular guide, actually, if you just pop their name in the search box up in the top corner and then click for that, you'll come up with, I think we have 3 Patricia guides in our members in London. But there's also, you can scroll down on the homepage and see various popular tours that we run. But we've also, at the top of the homepage now, got a little tab for virtual tours. So if you want to click on that, that will bring up suggestions of virtual tours, and you can find different possibilities there. And quite a lot of guides over this summer, we've realised that actually we can work from home, which I didn't expect to be able to say. But it's been such a joy to be able to connect with people all around the world. And chat to people in America and Australia and things like that. And it's not the same as doing a physical tour, but it's something that to whet your appetite until you're able to come and visit us in person, and or indeed fill in lots of background so that when you arrive, you're all geared up, ready to explore London. So last chance to ask any questions. We've got lots of people saying thank you and really interesting and very much enjoying it, but we haven't had any questions come in as such. So I think that's good. Next week we are going to, we'll carry on so from now on, for the moment, we're going to have broadcasts at 4:00 on Tuesdays, and the plan, I think, next week is for something on the Mayflower as we head towards Thanksgiving time of year. So looking back to the events of the Mayflower setting off from London. So thank you very much for joining us today. It is an absolute delight to be back again doing these, and hopefully you'll come back and join us next week. And also remember, you can head back and catch up on a lot of the walks we did, the tours, the broadcasts back in the spring and summer. And thank you, Patricia, for that fantastic talk about Kew Gardens.
You're welcome.
I'll be nipping out there as soon as I get the free time and the chance. Thank you very much, everyone. Lovely to see you. Enjoy the rest of your day.